This is America's Defense Communities, the podcast. I'm Randy Ford. Today we're talking about Montessori school. It's an educational philosophy and practice that goes back more than 100 years, and our guests will describe it better than I can. You're about to hear my conversation with three military spouses connected to Higher Ground education. Higher Ground has Montessori school programs across the country and says it's an ideal opportunity for military families, not just for students, but also for military spouses. That's what we're going to chat about today. My guests are Karolina Potterton, Director of Marketing at Higher Ground Education, Telisha Thomas, she's the DoD and Defense Community Liaison Consultant for Higher Ground, and Kelly Ficker. She's the first graduate of Higher Ground's Prepared Montessori Institute pilot program for military spouses, sometimes just called the PMI. You'll hear more about that from our guests. So here's our conversation about Higher Ground's Montessori school method and how it works for military families and communities. Karolina, let me start with you. What is Higher Ground education? And for people who may not know, what is Montessori? Or they may know a little bit, but help us understand what that is and what Higher Ground is.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll start off with what Montessori is. It's an educational approach that was developed by Dr. Maria Montessori over a century ago in Italy. And it emphasizes child-led learning, where children are given the freedom to explore and learn within their own pace, but within a structured environment. So it's not just a free-for-all for everybody in the classroom. There is a scope and sequence to all of the learning materials within a classroom. And it covers subjects from art to geography to math to literacy. And it really allows a child to advance well above what their peers are doing in a traditional classroom setting. Another very interesting and very great feature about a Montessori classroom is the mixed age classroom, which combines multiple ages of children within the classroom setting. So in a traditional school, you might have all 4-year-olds together, or all 5-year-olds together, or 6-year-olds. Within a Montessori classroom, you can have an age range of anywhere between 3 to 6 years old. And you begin to develop a very interesting dynamic between the students, where the younger students are able to learn from the older students, and the older students have an amazing opportunity to take on leadership positions at a very young age. And for Higher Ground, we take what is traditionally known as the Montessori method, but our goal is to mainstream and modernize it. So we are the largest network of Montessori schools. And Montessori is an interesting concept because it is a word that you cannot franchise, but we have made it into a private expansion project for us. So we have over 150 locations to date, and we're continuing to expand and grow every single month, which is very great and sometimes a little crazy. But very, very wonderful to see how fast we're growing. And overall, our mission is to empower children to become independent, capable, and self-motivated adults.
And what is that student experience like that may be different from, I went to traditional public high school or public schools, and I know a lot of people did. What is that student experience like and the outcome?
So the student experience, and I'll actually tailor this to a military child as well, just because my own children go through this program themselves. But it's particularly suited for a military child because regardless of where you go, there is a continuity of education. So you could start off in one Montessori classroom and have a specific scope and sequence that's logged within our LMS, or learning management system. And then you could transfer and go to a completely different state or city, or even go cross country and go, maybe over to the UK or Japan and continue that education, whether in person or virtually. So it really allows the flexibility for not only military families, but families who travel often or who, decide to move. Maybe they have a change in life circumstances, and it provides stability for the children.
That's great. So, Alicia, let me have you build on that. Your work is as the liaison with the Department of Defense. So you get to see how this impacts those military families. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I do want to kind of piggyback on what Karolina just shared was just creating that child that is independent, capable, and motivated to learning. What I have observed is just a child who's really motivated in their ability to grasp these concepts on their own, kind of this independent journey and satisfaction of learning something and learning how to do it on their own. And so those are the types of things that kind of stick with children along the way. They're just important concepts when you look at the academic career of a child. If they start now finding the self-gratification that I can do this. This is something that I understand how to do. I've learned how to make this work, create sort of this outcome for myself. That is what builds stronger students later on in life. And so when you look at the military family and you think, we're traveling around, we're moving constantly. And with that comes, breaks in the children's academic career. And what happens when we move from one duty station to the next, some of those things get kind of lost when we're going from school to school. But it's nice when a child can reflect back on their ability to problem solve and to gain the knowledge and the skills that they feel they need to be comfortable to grasp concepts. I feel that that is an invaluable skill when we're looking at high schoolers and children that will be entering college. So I just think that what I have witnessed here is just truly, truly important in building and supporting academic rigor for military students. So I'm looking at a childcare facility at Guidepost Montessori, but in my mind, I am also looking at the well-developed, well-evolved, solidly sound academic child later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we all know and hear the stories of military students who may struggle when they have to move schools and learn a whole new model, learn a whole new lifestyle, new classmates, all of that kind of stuff every couple of years. And it's important that they have some kind of stability and some kind of foundation to start with.
It is. And when I speak with parents, military parents at different ones of our campuses, they are pretty much really strong supporters of the pedagogy. They are completely happy with the programming, oftentimes asking, where are you guys going next? Because we love to put them in a program at the next duty station. That's always great feedback to hear, because that's what we want to hear. That's what we're here to do. That's what people like, Karolina and the rest of the teams there at Higher Ground, that's what they are there doing, is preparing preparing these children to be wonderful and well-rounded adults.
And we just heard 150 sites and growing so fast that Karolina said it feels a little crazy sometimes that it's growing so fast. I want to get to Kelly in a second and hear about her experience, but all three of you with us today are military spouses, so thank you all for your service. But Telisha, I know that there is also a focus at Higher Ground on working with military spouses and that there's a role within this system for that. And I'm curious what either you or Karolina has to say about that.
Yeah, so I'll just briefly touch up on it, and then and Karolina can expound even more on it. But we are actively engaged in hiring military spouses, but also training military spouses. So we developed a program with the Prepared Montessori Institute that was already in place and successful within Higher Ground. But we tailored it more to meet the needs of military spouses. And so we had our first cohort of 5 spouses, and we've had our first 2 to graduate. So one of the things, and we also have it recognized by MyCAA. So spouses who are qualified to receive the scholarship will receive one that really offsets the cost tremendously of the tuition. But we wanted to really have it focused on really being able to tailor to their needs and meet their needs and kind of be more hands-on in our approach to understand the military spouse community and population. And so we, like I said, we ran it as a pilot, a smaller group, so we could really focus more on who these people are as individuals. And they actually helped us kind of determine what this looks like for them. What are some of the unique challenges of a military spouse, even when you're training? Sometimes that's not easy. It's not as easy to be able to just pick up and, go somewhere else to train when you have little ones at home and we don't have that support system of family around us to babysit or watch children. So all of those things factor into what a program like this would look like for military spouses. And so Higher Ground has been very, very considerate and very generous even in their support of these spouses while in this program. And Karolina, if you want to, explain a little bit more about the PMI program, and then Kelly can also chime in on her experience. Can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, definitely. So through PMI specifically, our bread and butter when we're looking at our employees at Higher Ground Education and primarily for guidepost Montessori schools are our guides. Guides as in we call teachers. And we cannot operate schools, we cannot have successful programs without guides. And so bridging in a military spouse into these programs is very unique, especially when we're looking at all of the locations that we're trying to expand in future markets. So we have quite a few locations like upcoming in Tennessee at Fort Campbell. We're locating another school opening soon in Oceana Naval Air Station, in Sam Houston, Eglin, Fort Carson, Fort Leonard. So there's a ton of different locations that are coming up. And as we all know, military spouses often travel with their spouses when relocating. So this would then allow them to continue that career. They don't have to just be employed for 2, 3, 4 years and then completely pivot when they move. They can continue that career whenever they move to the next duty station.
That's great. And just like we were talking about the challenges that military students face, we know that spouse unemployment is a huge issue, especially when those PCS orders come in and they feel like they need to start anew. So that's great that they have that continuity. Kelly, you've been really patient. I want to get to you because you were part of this program that Telisha was just talking about. As I understand, one of those first 2 graduates that she mentioned, right?
Yes.
What has tell us about your experience.
It was a wonderful experience for me because I was a little nervous about doing online schooling and how motivated I would stay with that process. But having the military cohort was really motivating, and I just always knew that they were in my court and I could go to them with any questions or concerns. And there were several times that Telisha helped me navigate communication with other members in the department so that, I could get the answers I needed about assignments or different projects coming up. And most importantly, it just created a wonderful community for me because online learning can sometimes be a little isolating. You just feel like you're trying to figure this out all by yourself.
Right.
But I was able to meet with them once or twice a month, and we could just talk about what we were learning and any questions we had and try to navigate it together while also sharing experiences that were going on in our lives as military families. So talking about, where we were or where we're going to move or what was going on in our lives, some, the exciting stuff, the challenging stuff. So I really appreciated just being a part of that group while also going through new training.
It strikes me as you're talking about that it feels like even that training that you went through kind of follows that Montessori model of having the support structure and the people who are part of that cohort. What made you want to get involved in this?
I was out in California and trying to figure out next steps for going back to Fort Bragg. I had been there previously. I found a Montessori school and they required training and to be a lead guide. So I talked to another staff member there and she had gone through PMI and mentioned it. And the more I delved into it, I realized that there was they immediately connected me to the military cohort, was really nice because I included that in my application. So from the very beginning, I think even before I turned in my application, they were connecting me with those military resources, which was wonderful and really great on their behalf to, outreach that quickly with just, my first submission. So that was a great resource for me so that I could feel like I was moving towards a specific goal, even though we were in this point of transition. And it also helped me get that next position that I was looking towards at my new duty station. So it was a requirement, but it was also a wonderful opportunity for me and where I needed to go in my learning.
So what is next for you?
I spent 2 years teaching at a Montessori with my 0 to 3 lead guide certificate. And right now I'm focusing on teaching at a children's yoga studio. I also have a certificate in children's yoga and creative arts. So it's similar concepts, though, that I learned in Montessori about preparing yourself and preparing the environment so that the children can be successful in their independent learning and exploration of the materials themselves, the environment, and each other. So I'm really excited about that. And I feel like what I learned in the Montessori community is something I can take with me no matter where I go, whether it's in a classroom or anywhere else. And I always like to connect the dots looking backwards and realize like how I can add on to all the different experiences that I learned, whether it was, working at a coffee stand or in a school or
Sure.
any sort of learning I may have gathered along the way. So I'm just really grateful for the experience.
Yeah, and congratulations on having completed it. Um,
Thank you.
Telisha, when Karolina was just telling us about some of the new installations where there will be higher ground facilities soon, what is the experience like with the installation commanders or the defense communities? What is that relationship like, whether it's a new school or one that's already been established?
Yeah, so it's interesting and it varies. As you know, when you're dealing with different commanders and different leadership, it just depends on, kind of where they are, what the main focuses are of the installation. But one thing we know for sure is that childcare is one of those concerns that is a hot topic, and there's always a need for it. As long as you have
Mhm.
military families around, you will need quality childcare. So we have had a great response off most times where and wonderful champions for higher ground education. And getting that support from the installation as well as from the community leadership is fantastic in terms of creating awareness for what we are doing, spreading the word. We want to hire military spouses. We're not just another facility that's coming in there to put up a brick and mortar with a sign out front.
Mhm.
We actually want to help solve this childcare crisis that is in the military community right now, but also help to make your children develop into those wonderful adults, as Karolina was mentioning earlier. So when we are tapping into areas like Fort Leonard Wood or Fort Sam Houston with the Joint Base San Antonio areas, we do want to reach out first so that we can explain who we are, what we are doing. So, getting those community and DoD stakeholders involved early on is key to really create the awareness and understanding of who higher ground education is, why we feel that it is important to come to your area or your community, and what value we can actually add to that community. So like I said, it's just not some brick and mortar with a sign out there. There is a true meaning and purpose behind us coming there. Higher ground education has campuses everywhere. Karolina mentioned, over 150. They've opened up 3 recently, and correct me if I'm wrong, Karolina, in France, one in Paris, and they have campuses all over. So I feel personally proud to be able to represent an organization that is choosing to embark on a partnership with the military community and say, hey, we're listening and we want to come in and support you, and we want to come in and help, and not just your children, but also the spouses as well. So I think that's nice. And I just really, really appreciated hearing Kelly speak on her experience, because that is really what the goal is. She's not necessarily saying, hey, I'm near a guidepost, and so I'm going to work at a guidepost campus. But what she has done is taken her training, and she's still able to utilize that training even where there's not a location yet that she's living in. And so it's just kind of a little proud moment for me to just kind of hear that now after her being a part of this inaugural group of spouses in that program. So that speaks volumes.
I would just really quickly add on to that. I completely echo everything Telisha just said, and thank you, Kelly, for sharing. But at the fundamental level, yes, we are a business and we want to make sure that we're successful, and every single school that we open is profitable and it can operate for many years. but our overarching goal is to spread Montessori everywhere. So if that can be done through something like getting a PMI certificate for a military spouse who then goes and works at another Montessori or chooses to open up her own business, that's wonderful. The goal is to fundamentally change the way that we're offering education. And I think that Higher Ground is willing to move mountains for the military community.
That's great. And Karolina, let me close here by asking you, what for you personally is kind of the reward that you get from doing this work?
That's a loaded question. There's so many rewards. I think the primary one for me is to watch my children go through the program, and we're actually going to be PCSing overseas in 1 month.
Wow.
And so we'll be continuing part of their education through their virtual school, which is just a very awesome added benefit. But not only that is I get to keep my job. And it was never a question of, well, you're moving overseas. Okay, great. See you later. It was, no, you cannot leave. You are a part of our team. You're a part of our family. And so I really appreciate that they are fully invested in me as I'm invested in them. And it's just been wonderful to see also on the back end with our expansion team, how much time and dedication and prioritization that everybody is putting into opening up new locations on DoD facilities and installations.
That's great. Well, thank you, all three of you, for a really great conversation about something that I don't think people know much about. And hopefully this will let people know in the military and also in defense communities understand this a little bit more.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Karolina Potterton, Telisha Thomas, and Kelly Ficker. You can learn more at tohigherground.com, tohigherground.com. America's Defense Communities, the podcast, is a production of the Association of Defense Communities. Check out more about ADC and sign up for our daily on-base newsletter at defensecommunities.org. This episode was produced by Mark Parrott. Additional content was created by Asa Roden. I'm Randy Ford. Thanks for listening.